Lecture topic: The fear of Allah Ta'ala.
One of the very salient features of the pious people was the fear of Allah Ta'ala. They never became despondent, but they never were without the fear of Allah Ta'ala. This was at a very high level in their lives, and this used to bring them to cry abundantly in front of Allah Ta'ala. Thabit Rahmatullahi Alaih, who was the student of Sayyidina Radi ta'ala Anhu, he used to cry so much that he began losing his sight. So they called a physician. The physician said that, look, I will treat you, but provided that you then listen to what I'm going to say. So he said, well, what I have to listen to? He said, well, you have to stop crying. So he said that if these eyes can't cry, then what's the use of it? So he refused to undertake the treatment if that was going to be the precondition. If the condition was I have to refrain from crying, then there's no point in having these eyes also. So this was a distinct feature in all these pious people, that they had this extent of fear that they would be brought to tears repeatedly. Sufyan Sauri Rahmatullahi Alaih, he was seated somewhere and then he just started crying. Somebody asked him, but what is the problem? So he said, I'm not crying over my sins, meaning that is something which nevertheless, now we're talking about a personality, great muhaddis, faqih, and a giant of his time. So now, these people, when they spoke about sins, some very minor some mistakes that may sometimes happen, that they regarded as mountains on them. Very, very minor things that they would sometimes just probably err in, even that they regarded as mountains on them. I'm not crying over that because that is a separate matter. What I'm crying over, I'm fearing, Allah forbid, that due to my actions, my Iman must not get snatched away. Now can we imagine that people of that caliber, at that level, but they are also still concerned, my Iman must not get lost. And to that extent that fear is there, that is bringing them to cry over it. Now this is the aspect for us to ponder over, that what extent of fear of Allah Ta'ala is in our hearts, and what will develop this, when a person sits and thinks about his amal, what am I doing, where am I heading to, how am I conducting myself, and think deeply about it, that if this suddenly had to become my last day, and I'm going to be questioned about all this on the day of Qiyamah, how will I fare on that day, what will be my condition in the qabr. Daily there has to be some time to think about this. And when a person will think genuinely, deeply, with real concern, then this will create this fear in the heart. It will create this fear where a person doesn't remain completely heedless, that he is not concerned. Whatever happened, my ticket in Jannat is reserved, I don't need to bother about anything. Whereas this is a very, very delicate path, that when a person becomes heedless, that's when he is in trouble. When a person is afraid, insan is insan, he can make mistakes, but when he's afraid and that fear is in his heart, constantly being revived, then that becomes a means of protection. That becomes a means of his safety. So never to become heedless, and this Muraqabah of our situation, our condition, our conduct, how we spent our time, what we did, this is a very essential thing for us to do every day. How was the day passed? What we said, how we spoke to people, all these things can sometimes bite back very hard. So now when a person doesn't even sit to think about it, he becomes heedless of it. So I said something to somebody, so what? Mock somebody, so what's the difference? Or whatever I did, what's the problem with it? Life then carries on as if nothing happened, but then when it bites back, then sometimes it's too late. Allah Ta'ala give us the tawfiq.
अल्लाह अल्लाह कैसा प्यारा नाम है, आशिकों का मीना और जाम है।